She walked into the interview room with a folder in her hand and walked out without a job. But just 48 hours later, the same CEO who dismissed her was begging her to come back. Why? Because she quietly solved the company's biggest problem without even being hired. This is the story of how rejection turned into redemption and how one woman changed an entire company by thinking differently. Jasmine Carter was ready, not just mentally, but completely, deliberately, thoroughly ready. For the past week, she had poured every ounce of energy into preparing for this moment. She'd practiced responses to every possible interview question, even the tricky behavioral ones. She studied the company's mission, memorized the names of its executives, and analyzed their recent campaigns. Her resume was clean, concise, and tailored for this specific role. Her LinkedIn had just been updated the night before. That morning, she chose a navy blue blazer, minimal gold earrings, and a sleek black folder containing her portfolio. She looked the part. She was the part. And when she walked into the glass-paneled headquarters of one of Atlanta's fastest-growing tech startups, she carried the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. The role was for a marketing strategist, a senior position overseeing digital campaigns, brand tone, and user engagement for the company's flagship product, a smart productivity app. The salary was generous. The benefits? Impressive. But for Jasmine, it wasn't just about the paycheck. She was passionate about stories, how brands tell them, how users connect with them, and how great marketing can make people feel something. She had years of experience, a portfolio full of results, and a reputation as someone who didn't just follow trends. She set them. Still, the moment she stepped into the interview room, something felt off. It started with the glance, the subtle, quick look exchanged between two of the three panelists. Then came the handshake, limp, distracted. The man across the table didn't even look up from his iPad when he said her name. Introductions were rushed, eye contact was minimal, and the energy in the room, cold. She told herself to push through. Sometimes nerves or scheduling made people seem distant, but the questions confirmed what her instincts were already whispering. They didn't ask about her strategies or her campaign results. No one asked her to walk them through a project or explain her thinking behind a particular marketing decision. Instead, they stuck to surface-level queries. Things like, how do you deal with stress? Do you work better alone or on a team? Tell us about a time you faced conflict at work. Jasmine answered each one clearly, with examples and data where appropriate. But it was obvious. This wasn't a deep dive. This was a checkbox conversation. Worse still, every time she mentioned her work, her voice was met with polite nods, sometimes distracted glances at watches or email alerts flashing on open laptops. One woman smiled vaguely and asked, "How do you see yourself fitting into a fast-paced, high-performing culture like ours?" Jasmine, still calm, responded thoughtfully about her experience working with lean teams on tight deadlines. But she knew this wasn't about her experience. It wasn't about her work. They'd made up their minds the moment she walked in. She could see it on their faces. They weren't looking for strategy or creativity. They were looking for comfort, familiarity, cultural fit. And Jasmine, a confident, articulate Black woman with bold ideas and a direct style, wasn't what they expected. Finally, after 27 minutes, yes, she counted, one of the panelists, a man in his late 40s with a crisp gray suit and a neutral expression, leaned forward and said the line she would never forget. "We appreciate your time, Jasmine, but we're looking for someone with a bit more alignment." She paused. Alignment. The word hung in the air like smoke. Vague, padded, polite, but painfully clear. It was the same coded language she'd heard before. Not loud, not angry, just quietly exclusionary. Jasmine smiled, a small, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, and stood. She shook hands, thanked them for the opportunity, and walked out with the same grace she walked in with. But inside, behind the calm demeanor, she felt the familiar sting. She'd done everything right. She'd prepared harder than most. She'd shown up early, dressed well, spoken with clarity, and brought a portfolio that could have carried the interview. But none of that mattered. Not really. She didn't fit into their idea of what a strategist looked like. She wasn't aligned, not with their expectations, their comfort zones, or maybe even their biases. And yet, as Jasmine stepped into the elevator and stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls, she didn't feel defeated. Not this time. There was a fire in her chest, quiet, steady, and growing. They may have rejected her, but they had no idea what they just turned down. That night, Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't vent to her group chat, didn't call her sister to replay the awkward moments, didn't even open her freezer for the emergency pint of ice cream she usually saved for heartbreak or hard days. Instead, she opened her laptop. The sting of rejection was still fresh, but her mind refused to sit still. Something about that interview gnawed at her, not just the dismissal, but the company itself. As she browsed their website again, curiosity turned into analysis. Their homepage felt cold. No story, no personality, just buzzwords and jargon stacked like bricks. She clicked over to their Instagram. Flat engagement, same generic captions, low likes, few comments. Then she checked their Twitter, or X now. Same result. She scrolled through LinkedIn posts announcing the launch of their new productivity app, the one the strategist role was meant to promote, and immediately spotted the issue. The messaging wasn't connecting. There was no story, no hook, no real emotional appeal. The product was useful, sure, but there was no why, no clear reason for anyone to care. Jasmine, with her marketing-trained eyes, could see the cracks immediately. The company had a great product and a growing team, but their brand had no soul, and they didn't even know it. She opened Google Trends, typed in the app name, compared it to a few competitors. The numbers weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. She clicked into user reviews on the App Store. Most people liked the functionality but complained about the onboarding process or how the app felt generic. That word came up a lot. Generic, forgettable, boring. Jasmine felt her mind shift gears, almost involuntarily. She pulled up a blank slide deck and began jotting down notes. One slide turned into three. First, a breakdown of what was going wrong, low engagement, flat messaging, and a missed emotional connection with users. Then a slide showing what their top competitor was doing differently. Human-centered storytelling, vibrant content, and community engagement. Then the third slide, her solution. A simple but bold campaign idea that would reframe the app not just as a tool, but as a lifeline for busy creatives and professionals. She gave it a name, a sample tagline, even broke the strategy into content pillars, short videos, user stories, mini case studies, interactive polls. She detailed how to launch it in phases, how to measure success, and which influencers to approach. 2 hours flew by. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't moved from her desk. She was in the zone, the place where passion meets purpose. By midnight, Jasmine stared at her 3-slide deck and smiled. Not a proud, braggy smile, but the smile of someone who knew she'd done something important. Not to prove herself to them, but to remind herself of her value. She considered whether to send it. It wasn't about trying to get the job back. That door was clearly closed. But if there was even the smallest chance that someone would read it and realize what they had missed, maybe it was worth the risk. She went back to the rejection email, which had landed in her inbox just a few hours earlier. A generic thank you, with a polite wish for her future. She hit reply. Her message was short and professional. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with your team. I completely respect your decision. However, during my prep and follow-up research, I noticed something I thought might help your upcoming product launch. Attached is a very brief concept deck. Please feel free to use it however you like. No obligation or expectation from my end. Wishing your team continued success. No bitterness, no desperation, just facts, strategy, and kindness. She attached the file, took a deep breath, and hit send. Then she closed her laptop, turned off the light, and went to bed. Rejected? Maybe, but defeated. Not even close. The next morning, Jasmine woke up earlier than usual. She didn't expect anything, certainly not a reply to the late-night email she'd sent. She'd written it for closure, not for response. Still, something compelled her to check her inbox before even brushing her teeth. And there it was, A new message. Subject line. RE colon, thank you dash, and something extra period. But it wasn't from HR. It was from the CEO himself, Nathan Reynolds. She blinked, opened the email. His message was short and urgent. Jasmine, I just saw your concept deck. We need to talk today. Please let me know if you're available this morning, or come by the office as soon as you can. This is important. Jasmine's heart thudded in her chest. She read it twice to make sure she wasn't imagining it. Then, without hesitation, she threw on a blazer, pulled her hair into a neat bun, and left her apartment with a different kind of energy. The same building she had walked out of, defeated just 24 hours earlier, now loomed ahead with a new kind of tension. A spark. She wasn't being called back for a second interview. She was being summoned. This time, there was no receptionist asking her to wait. A woman from the executive floor came down personally to escort her. She bypassed the waiting area. No water cup, no small talk. Straight into the boardroom. And there he was, Nathan Reynolds, CEO and co-founder, standing at the head of the table with a printout of her deck in his hand. He didn't waste time. I don't know why you weren't hired yesterday, he said, shaking his head. But what you sent us, it's exactly what we've been missing. Jasmine sat down, calm but focused. Nathan continued, flipping through the pages. We launched this product 6 weeks ago and couldn't figure out why engagement was flat. We blamed the algorithm, the economy, even the design team. But it's what you pointed out. The story's missing. The emotion, the connection. He leaned forward, both elbows on the table. I ran this deck by our product and content teams this morning. They're on board, fully. They want to start building this campaign immediately. He paused. If you're still interested, I'd like to offer you a contract position, starting immediately. Competitive pay, flexible hours. Let's just get this campaign going. Jasmine didn't blink. She looked at him, steady and clear. Thank you, she said. But if I'm going to drive this campaign, I don't want to do it from the sidelines. I want to be your head of strategy. Silence. A long one. Nathan sat back in his chair, studying her. The confidence, the clarity, the complete lack of fear. Finally, he cracked a smile. You know what, he said. Let me get the paperwork started. And just like that, everything changed. By the following Monday, Jasmine Carter had an official title, a badge, a corner desk, and full control of the company's upcoming brand push. The same people who had dismissed her now listened intently in strategy meetings. She didn't mention the rejection. She didn't carry resentment. She simply got to work. Her first step? Rewriting the entire narrative around the app. No more buzzwords. She focused on the human stories. The creatives managing multiple gigs. The parents juggling side hustles. The freelancers burning out from productivity pressure. She launched a mini-doc series, hosted AMAs on Instagram, and built partnerships with niche creators who had loyal followings. Within 6 weeks, app downloads tripled. Within 2 months, a feature on TechCrunch. By the 3rd month, the company's brand reputation had shifted from just another tool to the tool that actually understood its users. Internally, the company also changed. Hiring processes were reevaluated. The DEI team expanded. Interview training was rolled out, and cultural alignment was redefined, not as sameness, but as the ability to bring something new to the table. Jasmine didn't ask for credit. She didn't need it. Her results spoke for her. And the same CEO who once overlooked her now proudly introduced her at investor meetings as the voice we didn't know we needed. Jasmine never rubbed it in. She just kept delivering. Quietly powerful, unshakably brilliant. 3 months later, the campaign was everywhere. Billboards lit up in downtown Atlanta with bold taglines Jasmine had written on a sleepless Tuesday night. Influencers were sharing personal stories using the app, not because they were paid to, but because Jasmine's strategy made it feel real, useful, human. The company's Instagram, once cold and generic, now buzzed with authentic user comments and viral video snippets. LinkedIn posts hit thousands of impressions within hours. And the app? It went from 12,000 downloads a month to nearly 60,000. Tech blogs took notice. Marketing insiders whispered about the unexpected rebrand that had flipped the company's image practically overnight. But no one outside the boardroom knew that the mastermind behind it all was the same woman who had once been told she lacked alignment. Jasmine didn't care about fame. She cared about impact. Her team grew under her leadership. Interns flourished. Junior staff felt heard. She made room for others the way no one had made room for her. Still, behind the scenes, the shift was seismic. Inside the company, hiring practices changed from the ground up. The CEO, Nathan, brought in a DEI consultant to audit internal processes. The recruitment team was retrained. The phrase culture fit was banned from evaluation forms. In its place, culture add. Jasmine's story became a quiet lesson, whispered in meetings, used in training decks, referenced in executive coaching sessions. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a moment of revelation. The rejection had been a failure, not hers but theirs, and they knew it. Jasmine never gloated. She didn't throw the past in anyone's face. She wasn't there to punish. She was there to build. And she did, with precision, with brilliance, and with the kind of leadership that didn't need noise to be felt. Nathan, once skeptical, now brought her into every major conversation. Product roadmaps, investor calls, high-level partnerships. She became not just head of strategy, but a voice of vision inside the company. People listened when she spoke, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. One afternoon during a team off-site, someone from HR casually asked her what had given her the courage to send that deck, to follow up after rejection, to offer ideas when the door had already been closed. Jasmine didn't hesitate. "I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong," she said. "I just showed them what they overlooked." The room went quiet, not out of awkwardness, but out of respect, because everyone knew they were only sitting in that room, celebrating wins, riding the wave of a brand comeback, because one woman chose not to stay silent. Jasmine's story didn't end with a job offer. It began with rejection, pivoted through courage, and bloomed through leadership. And for every person who ever walked into a room only to be underestimated, she became something more than a strategist. She became proof that you don't always need a seat at the table. Sometimes you build your own. 6 months after that fateful interview, Jasmine Carter stood on stage at a national marketing conference, holding a wireless mic in one hand and a quiet smile on her face. She wasn't there as an attendee. She wasn't even on a panel. She was the keynote speaker. The same woman who once walked out of a boardroom with nothing but dignity now addressed a crowd of over 2,000 executives, brand leaders, and aspiring marketers. Her talk? Turning rejection into strategy. The audience hung on every word, not because she shouted, not because she bragged, but because her story was real and deeply familiar to so many in the room. She spoke about the rejection, the vague feedback, the way people measure fit through the lens of familiarity. And then she walked them through how she flipped the script, not with anger, not with revenge, but with insight, action, vision. "I didn't wait for the system to recognize me," she said toward the end of her speech. "I showed up with solutions, and eventually the system adjusted." Applause followed, not loud and chaotic, but steady and lasting, the kind that means something. Back at the company, Jasmine's influence had become woven into the culture. New hires were more diverse. Campaign ideas came from all corners of the building. Feedback was honest, constructive, and welcomed. People who once felt like outsiders now had space, because Jasmine didn't just take a seat at the table, she reshaped the table. The CEO who once overlooked her now referred to her as the heart of the brand. Quarterly reports showed growth across every metric: customer retention, user engagement, market trust. But beyond the numbers, the company had evolved. It had soul now, story, purpose, and that all traced back to one act of quiet defiance: a 3-slide PDF attached to a polite rejection reply. Jasmine never made a big deal out of it. She never posted about it, never turned it into a LinkedIn rant or a viral tweet. She let the work speak. She let the results roar. Months later, when asked in a podcast interview how she stayed calm after being dismissed so casually, Jasmine answered with the same poise she'd carried from day one. They couldn't see what I could bring, she said. So I showed them, not to get their approval, but to remind myself that their oversight wasn't my limitation. That line went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was true. Jasmine Carter's story became more than a workplace anecdote. It became a blueprint for every underestimated voice, a signal to every rejected resume, a reminder that sometimes the greatest wins don't start with applause. They start with a closed door, a deep breath, and the decision to try anyway.